come in, we will make sure to get them up to speed. Can we just go, I know we have Colleen on the phone and I think and Jack as well. Is there anyone else on the line?
Yes, this is Larry Corky with DMME.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, great. I don't think we have any new faces around the table, but we will go ahead and get started. I did want to just start with a quick safety message. I will do one because we've been emphasizing, obviously, it's really around preparation and coronavirus. I would really just point everyone to the expert resources. That's not me. And the CDC website for updates at cdc.gov, and then the practices that they're, of course, emphasizing, which is preparation, the things like washing your hands, staying home if you're sick, frankly. And I would just also say, if you're not sick, don't buy the masks, because people that actually need them, especially in the treatment and medical community, we don't want to. I just read yesterday how France has essentially commandeered all the masks the government has because people were buying them unnecessarily. So with that, unless there's anyone has anything to add, I will move on to the next minutes. So yeah, the next part is the minutes from the November 12th meeting that Brandy sent out in advance. I did not have any changes, but if folks did have, or if we'd like to take a minute to review them, we can do that, and then we'll entertain if there's any edits or changes that we need to take a look at.
Do you have an extra copy?
I don't. Yes, we do. Right. Jumped into kind of the meat of the schedule. We talked a little bit. There's actually quite a bit going on at the federal government level, both legislatively, but then also in response to the FY 2020 budget that laid out some very significant changes, new programs and things in the nuclear energy space. So first off, on the legislative front, and Scott, feel free to jump in on this as well. This week, the Senate is actually in consideration of a broad energy package that includes legislation for nuclear, especially for advanced nuclear. It has many of the elements that was contained in the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, which is actually helping to establish in law the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Project, pushing the Department of Energy to make available quantities of high-assay, low-enriched uranium to help power the next generation of reactors, which is very important as we get to the commercial capabilities in that space. So there's obviously a lot more in that energy package. It covers a broad range of technologies and topics, including kind of working towards the recess session. So that's a very good thing. It will help, I think, as we've talked to folks on the House side that are working on the elements of advanced nuclear and some of the nuclear R&D bills. Having something come over from the Senate will be a good prompting for them to start moving legislation. And on that note, the House Science and Technology Committee has released, actually I don't know if they've technically released the discussion draft, but they're in the process of fielding comments on a advanced nuclear energy research and development bill, which includes the elements of NELA that are under their jurisdiction. So things like the VTR and the demonstration reactor program, in addition to other elements that are kind of under the nuclear energy R&D space. So I think they're looking to start consideration and movement on that bill in committee after the recess in April. Additionally, the House Energy and Commerce Committee has been working on elements of NELA. They've already passed a bill that deals with HALEU out of committee. That was a standalone bill actually from the last Congress. They have been looking at the power purchase agreement elements. It is included in the, I would call it the clean energy principles that they've been advancing in committee that looks more broadly at climate change. And then yesterday they actually had a hearing on advanced nuclear and its role in combating climate change and 100% carbon-free system, where there were discussions of the elements of NELA, which I think is putting them in a good place procedurally when they start having the opportunity potentially just to consider the Luria-Riggleman package on the floor later this year. So that's kind of where we are. And then in addition to that, we're right in the middle of the fiscal year 2021 budget discussions. Appropriations hearings are happening kind of as we speak. And I think there's an aggressive timeline for both the House and the Senate to work towards considerations of their bills, strong support for things like the demonstration projects and other elements, the versatile test reactor out at Idaho, well, I shouldn't say out at Idaho National Lab, under INL's leadership with GE and TerraPower working on that. And many other elements in the advanced nuclear space, I think, will again receive strong support as they did in FY 2020. So before we moved on to more specifically the demonstration program at DOE, are there any questions about kind of where we are on the legislative front? I think this mirrors nicely into what we're seeing here in the state of Virginia, which is good. I think there's a lot of synergy. And one thing that's great is actually on the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, both in the House and the Senate, there is strong support from the Virginia delegation. So in the House, it's actually co-sponsored, like I said, by Representatives Luria and Riggleman from Virginia. Senator Warner's on the bill as a co-sponsor in the Senate. Abigail Spanberger is a co-sponsor as well in the House. So. Really good synergy there with what Virginia's also doing here in Richmond.
Is that first piece of legislation you're talking about, the American Energy Innovation Act?
Yes, yes, correct, sorry. Yeah, they've renamed different things, so yeah, that's the big package. Okay, so then I did want to just kind of answer any questions and make sure everybody's aware about what DOE is doing with the instructions from the fiscal year 2020 appropriations bill that established the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. It laid out $230 million for various elements, including $160 million for DOE to fund 2 demonstrations of advanced reactor technologies. The definition of that is a little bit maybe more broad. It's not, it includes advanced light water reactors as well as what we call next generation non-light water. Micro, large, small, it can kind of include everything as long as it's an evolution from current technology. It also does exclude technologies that are already under current funding from the Department of Energy, like for example, NuScale's SMR.
I believe the caveat is if you can't receive cost share money from this bucket, if you will, this $230 million, if you also are receiving SMR related R&D funds, and specifically FY20,
yes,
to keep it as narrow as possible, because that's what the law or the language specifically says. So if you're in the SMR bucket and that's what you're going after, is helping you out, can't play in this area.
DOE released, and the other thing I would say that's an interesting element of what there's a lot of interesting things about what the FY 2020 budget did in this space. One thing is they set out a very aggressive timeline for DOE to implement or to request information, to request proposals, and actually implement this program. I think it's challenging for DOE, but that was the point. It was a little bit aspirational, but thus far I would give DOE credit. They're they're moving very quickly. They put out a request for information back in, was it the beginning of February?
Yeah.
And responses were due last week. Yesterday, Secretary Barronwall mentioned that I think it was either 31 or 33 responses that they've gotten to the RFI. So that's great. A lot of information for them to digest. And then she also followed that up with saying they're going to look at actually rolling out the RFP in the next few weeks. No specific date, but there will be kind of 2 stages to the RFP. They're going to look for initial, I guess you would call it expressions of interest, but they're trying to, because they're trying to move so quickly, they're trying to focus their resources and their evaluation so that they can get the proposals evaluated, understand who's viable, and make their decisions in a timely manner, because again, they want to get folks started. They're taking very seriously the instructions from the appropriators, and they want to get this program rolling. So I don't know if you have anything else.
The only thing I would add is there's, of the 230, you can break, there's 160 of that is meant for 2 $80 million awards, but there's a 50-50 cost share tied to that. And then there's up to 5 other awards, which is 20 to industry or partner team, 80 to the government for essentially, what's it called, enabling technologies that are not as mature, to help mature those. So there's really funds for 7 reactor-like programs, if you think of it that way.
Yeah, and the intent there is, I think the appropriators and DOE don't want the demonstration projects to stop at 2. Right? They know that there are a lot of technologies and potential solutions out there, and they're at different stages of development. And they were also working very closely with the authors of the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, which looks at 2 to 5 demonstrations, and by 2035, excuse me. And so this is trying to set up a pipeline of projects, and so this is again some kind of, I would call it seed investment to move those technologies closer to demonstration, with the intent that in subsequent funding years there could be availability of funds for those additional projects as well. Okay. Other questions?
Do we have a feel for whether any of those will come to Virginia?
Well, I think you'd probably have to ask some of the companies that may be applying. I don't know if they're, I could speak a little bit for Framatome. Our interest is really in where can we deploy the technology that there's a user that would be of interest, and our hope would be that would be in Virginia. That would be great. I think we're going to talk about in a minute here some of the steps that the state is trying to take, I think, to set Virginia up for success in this space. Other questions? Okay. So then I'm going to turn it over to April to update us on
You didn't
all
want to do
that's
the
been
minutes?
going on.
We did.
No, we did.
We
the
did, I
minutes.
missed
Minutes
it.
ago.
I was on somewhere else. I guess it'll be me then.
Wait,
Yeah.
we missed it a minute.
It was easy.
If there are updates, we'll take a second to take a look through. I want to make sure if there's any additions or updates we need to make. We can do that now. Anybody got anything? Good. I think we've got that in a much better place than we did here.
George Mason and UVA do have new presidents.
Cover for me. And we could completely clutter up your list of applicable degree programs as you wish.
I would say if, Sean, if there is something glaring that you would like to add.
Sure, sure. I'll
please.
send you an email
Yeah,
afterwards.
that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so we talked a little bit about speakers, but are there other ideas? I know we've gone through a little bit last year and brought some of those folks in. I think DOE is definitely one that we would like to target, I think, for the next meeting. Are there other suggestions that folks have for speakers this year?
Well, I think other than DOE, I think we're going to have our hands full reviewing whatever work products are in place, and it might not be the best time to just have random speakers. But I think it would be useful to have DOE come in and talk.
Agreed. Yeah, I've talked to Alice Capanetti, who's overseeing this. I think, especially once they get the RFP out, they will be able to. They'll be able to be a little bit more free with coming in. And actually, it reminds me of something that I wanted to mention to this group. One of the elements that's a little interesting about the demonstration projects is the review process that they're going to be undertaking. The legislation actually instructed them to develop a panel of outside experts, including from industry, I think it was manufacturing.
Sort of covered the waterfront,
Yeah,
academia, it was
Yeah.
pretty, sort of checked a bunch of boxes of having external experts in different areas.
Yes, and I think one of the challenges DOE is going to have in this area is actually finding the resources that can serve as a reviewer but also not be conflicted out. So I think that might be an interesting thing for this group to think about. If there are folks that you might suggest would be good resources, reach out to me. We can put you in touch with the right person at DOE, because I know they are actually soliciting suggestions, because I think that is going to be a challenge, but it is something that they have, that is a priority for them to be doing in the review, in addition to the internal DOE review that they always will undergo for these types of RFPs. They're really trying to focus on how do they best vet the proposals that can accomplish what they're been asked to set out, which is actually being able to deliver in a 5 to 7 year timeline, and the ability to do that with the available budget.
And are you thinking that the ACRS is conflicted out?
I don't know. I think that was one of the things I heard suggested is, wouldn't they just use the ACRS? So they may use resources from there, but it's kind of hard because the appropriations bill got pretty specific as to who they wanted. It was, I think it was manufacturing. It was industry, and even within industry, it was like a user, like a utility, which I think is going to be a challenge if utilities are on some of these teams. But they're really trying to understand how does this fit in with current system, future, that kind of thing.
On a speaker though, one of the suggestions I have is that if you guys want Matt Kellum to come back to give you an update on where they're at with the Department of Education on the 17th cluster. I was with them last Friday. That will be up and running this summer. Was it right, Randy? June?
Yeah, the last meeting on the curriculum is the end of March.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're targeting summer.
You know, and then we'd also talked about, I think maybe this is better for either September or late in the year. We talked about the other authorities within the Commonwealth, so I think that's something we still have on the radar and our offer to speak with them as well.
And then there's another group that Randy and I met during the legislature. It's Carbon Free for Virginia. They are a group out of Northern Virginia, but they may be somebody you may want to come talk to, have them come talk to you. They're a group of engineers, retired and working, that just kind of come together and are supporting efforts. So they've seemed, I've listened to them talk in a couple of committees. They are pretty engaging.
Are there updates from any of the members that they'd like to share or other information?
Yeah, I've said in this context before, we've been in competition with New York for a new facility, and we lost. I got announced about a month ago.
Will you all still have a role in that, though?
Yeah. But that is being negotiated.
Okay.
And may I say that being a junior partner is no fun.
Sure. Okay, if there's any other new business, if not, we will open it up for public comment.